So when the note said this note is redeemable in lawful money, that meant it was the receipt for the dollar. The dollar was down in the warehouse. What they had issued was a piece of paper that was a receipt for it, but it became so convenient for people to trade the receipts rather than carry around the burdensome, bulky gold and silver coin in their pockets. Well, if you got an honest system, it's fine. There's no reason. And people today, they want to advocate that we have only United States notes. Instead of the Federal Reserve Bank, we got to get rid of the Federal Reserve Bank, and we got to have United States notes where the government can control how many are printed. Yeah, right. So it still comes back to the depravity of man, doesn't it? And the founders, Roger Sherman especially, from Connecticut. How many here ever heard of Roger Sherman? Okay, a few. Let me tell you why, and I was much like the majority until I began this research, but a man by the name of Tupper Saucy wrote a book called The Miracle on Main Street back about 1980, and that's where he educated many of us on who Roger Sherman was. But you know, we all should know who Roger Sherman was. It should roll off of our lips as easily as Ben Franklin, George Washington, Tom Jefferson. That's how well known he should be, except he's been suppressed once again by the school system, the government school system. Roger Sherman, did you know he signed more of the founding documents than anybody else? He signed the Continental Association of 1774. He signed the Declaration in 76. He signed the Articles of Confederation in, what was that, 81? And he also was a signer of the Constitution. Nobody else signed 4. Many of them signed 2 and 3, but he was a more active founder than anyone. And most of us have never heard of him. Why? Because he was the one that inserted Article 1, Section 10, Phrase 1, Clause 1, called "No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts." And I maintain, and Tupper maintained, that the reason we don't know who Sherman is because they don't want that known. They don't want that money thing known. So I know I'm going around my elbow to get to my thumb here, but I wanted to point out to you, when they took that away from us, we lost our control over the federal government, and they gained total power over us. And so people want to complain about this and complain about that and blah, 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 blah. For 25 years, I've been telling the world and in print and from these podiums that if you solve the legal tender problem, you get us back to certain gold and silver coin, you will solve almost every other social problem in America. Think of the programs that would be eradicated, the giveaways. They can't give it away because they can't create it. And that's how we controlled them. You see, in the original Constitution, the money floated up. The states had the power. The states gave the money to the federal government through apportionment. And that meant if the feds wanted to do something, they had to have permission of all the 13, then 48, and now 50 states. And so the states, they would send the proposal out to the state capitals. And here's what we want to do. We're going to build this highway, or we're going to do a new post office system, or whatever the federal wants to do. They got to get permission of the states originally. And so the states would say, yeah, that's pretty good, but we can't pay for 1/48 of it. They said, no, you don't have to. It's by apportionment. So you got 20 million people in California, and you only got 2.5 million people in Mississippi. Well, then we're going to cut the percentage down. The Mississippians only have to pay, what, 1/10 of it, you see? That's apportionment. And now the money flows to the federal government, and they are dependent upon us. They did away with that when they did away with lawful money. Suddenly, with the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank, the federales had the power to float the money down. They didn't have to get permission from the states to do anything. And so they could create all these alphabet agencies, which they, of course, have, and give away money to this program or that one. And then you may wonder why the Federal Reserve Bank and the federal income tax were both instigated in the same year, 1913. Well, I'll tell you why. Because one is useless without the other. You don't need an income tax in a system of gold and silver or a system of barter. In other words, I say, hey, you're a talented house painter. I need to have my house painted. And I say, you say, well, yeah, but I need my grass cut all summer too because my lawnmower broke down. Okay, I'll trade you. I'll cut your grass from May till September if you'll paint my house this summer. Fine. Now, someone please tell me what function the federal government has in that transaction. That's a contract between him and me, right?
Tax the value of the trade.
Right. Well, but with legal tender and the government floating the money down, there's got to be some kind of vacuum system, but else we drowned in red ink debt, don't we? So it's called the income tax. I call it a little vacuum system. They have a little vacuum cleaner every April 15th. And this was the reason for that withholding scheme put forth on us in World War II, because most people would not pay it, or they wouldn't have it to pay it, or they would end up giving the metaphoric finger to the government anyway because it got too high. And so with this situation withholding now, and so many people being employees, that they got $4,000 of my money, and I only owe $1,500. I'd better file, and I'll get back $3,500. And of course, a whole new industry, of course, was also established too, called income tax filers and whatever all those guys on the street are. Well, that's the purpose of the income tax. It's not any good. It's not of any use in a lawful money system, and the fiat money system is no good. It'll crash totally without it. They have to have it. It's going to crash anyway because now they've overcome their powers and they're creating so much now they're even diluting out the whole bit. So someone asked me in the hallway earlier, you know, what can we do? Well, you need some gold and silver coin or paid for real estate or all three. Because you're going to be able to trade for food and everything else. Americans are very industrious people, but and I've just moved out of the city, by the way. I just got out of the jungle. I don't even have TV anymore. Really. And I still own the house because I couldn't sell it because the market's been so destroyed, so I'm renting the house. But I'm out in the country with some like-minded Christian people. We got some gardens and we got some good cooks all up and down the street. We got plenty of ammunition. So I'm feeling good about that situation. And I'm also kind of, well, I shouldn't say this publicly because a lot of you are going to be hurt. But I position myself that, hey, if this crash comes, I say, fine, let it come, bring it on. It's going to happen sooner or later. Well, anyhow, that's the power of legal tender, and that's how so many of these other things are perpetrated. You wonder, how can this good Christian brother, I grew up with him, he'd been in my church, he was president of the Rotary Club, he was Mr. Up and Coming, the most likely to succeed. Man, we elected him to Congress. And he goes up there and 6 months later, he's voting like all the rest of them. And we say, what happened to him? I'll tell you what happened to him. The power of legal tender. You drop about 500,000 Federal Reserve notes on a guy's desk, it has remarkable power. But let me tell you how far else it goes. Let's say that you've got somebody like a Ron Paul or a Larry McDonald. Remember him? 007? George Hansen. These people, the Crane brothers from Illinois. Ron Paul told me in 1983, we had him as a guest speaker in Atlanta when I lived there, and we sat next to each other. I introduced him as a dinner speaker and all, and so I had a nice conversation at dinner time, and he told me that at that time, there were about 5 of them. He said when a certain bill came up that I knew was going to be leftist or against the Constitution in any way, he said I could almost predict the vote. It would be 430 to 5. And he'd tell me who the 5 were, and the ones I just named.